agenda. I'm going to ask PC John to give his talk first because he needs to get away. So, over to you, John.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm warm up back tonight. Just a brief overview of what's been happening the last few months. Apologies for not being here for quite a few of those months. We've had the Extinction Rebellion, we've had all sorts going on, which has taken pretty much us away from what we normally do. So apologies for that. Just a quick overview of the crime stats so far. This month, although we're only 4 days in, there's been no burglaries, so fingers crossed. Hopefully it stays like it. Unfortunately, we weren't so lucky in January where we had 11, and I've put where are we? The shed burglaries and things like that in with that lot as well, and the attempts. With those burglaries, vehicles have been stolen as well. So I think houses have been targeted for the vehicle. So not a lot has been stolen monetary wise, but the cars are quite high powered vehicles and they've been stolen off the drive with the keys. So if you do have a nice car, try and keep the keys sort of out of reach or in a lock cupboard. Theft, like I say, theft from motor vehicle and theft from motor vehicle has spiked a little bit higher than normal. I'll go on to a couple of good news stories because I know we're pressed for time. November saw a prolific burglary team in and around Morton with some good work by me. Some CCTV and the help of the burglary team. I looked at a number of bits of footage of CCTV. The burglar had a very distinctive walk. He was extremely ugly, which helped. And we managed to, well, I managed to pin him down to about 5 burglaries in and around Morton. That's Lower Morton up to Merton Park. He was arrested in November, and he was also wanted by Croydon for about 5 or 6 and Surrey for a couple as well. So he is now on remand and he is going to Crown Court in May. So I've got a Crown Court day out. Last week we had a theft of, or attempted theft of £2,500 from the stationers in Cran Lane at Warden. The court came out as a knife-point robbery. Just to show that the Safer Neighbourhood Team is out, we managed to find him, detain him, and he was arrested and was subsequently charged with attempted theft. So money was recovered and job's good. We're hoping to do speed watch and weapons sweeps, and we'd like you, the public, to come along and help us. I know Ed's been along before on speed watches. Did you do weapons sweeps as well?
No, but happy to be on the next one.
Lovely, okay. They're really easy to do. Ed was saying that he got to play with the camera, speed camera, and weapon sweeps are literally going into a lovely park for about an hour and looking in bushes and anywhere that possible knives and things could be kept. But what I'll do is I'll let everybody know. It'll be on our email, on our website, and I'll let everybody know via, some of you might not be on Twitter or whatever, but it'll go on social media as well. We are in the process of tackling the beggars in Morton, along with the London Borough of Merton Antisocial Behaviour Unit, Jeanette Chacksfield. And we are pushing the smart water now. We've now been told that everybody's eligible to have some. So it's not just specific roads. We did do Wessex Avenue the other day, and we get a good take up on that. We will be going back because there's a few people out. But so if you are interested in smart water, please let us know. You've got our phone numbers on the cards that have been given out. If you do, we will come round, we'll give you a little demonstration of it, well not of the actual smart water in how we'll give it as how it works, and then we'll take some details and that'll be that. Is there any questions anybody would like to answer?
Congratulations on apprehending the chap who took the cash and recovering the cash. Why only attempted theft?
Because it was recovered. Yeah, recovered, and I think actually that the victim recovered the money himself, and we came across him and identified him further up the road. So yeah, we were quite fortunate. He's my eagle eyes spotted him.
But didn't you say something about a knife point robbery, in which case you got him for something
It came out initially as knife point robbery, so we didn't know if he had a knife on him or it was quite sketchy. We came to the area because we were out and about in the car. Came to the area and a member of the public said he'd run down Popper Road South. So I drove down Popper Road South, did a U-turn at the bottom, came back up Martin Way and spotted him walking out of Moston into Martin Way, so he was caught there. But there was no knife. We did have a dog unit down there. We did a search, but there was no knife recovered.
Can I ask you, you mentioned smart water. In what way is it going to be used?
Basically,
I know what smart water is.
yeah.
In what context will it be used?
It's given out to anybody who wants it. It doesn't prevent you from being burgled. What it is basically if, God forbid, you are a victim of burglary and we're fortunate enough to recover goods, it'll go under the ultraviolet light, it pings up. It will then go off to be tested because it's plant DNA. It will be tested by Smart Water. Smart Water get in contact with us and say it belongs to Joe Bloggs. We then get in contact with them and they're reunited with their property. But it doesn't prevent you from being a victim of crime, but hopefully it will assist in getting any property back that's recovered.
Would people be expected to have a sticker on the house saying
You've got
items are...
the kits come with 2 stickers. Generally we ask to have one placed in view at the front and one at the back. And again, they're your little deterrent, if you like. They're the thieves can see it. You've got Smart Water. There were I think posters or whatever that went up in the streets. That was when it first came out. We were only allowed to do block streets, and we were told the ones we had to do. But now it's anybody who wants it can have it. No,
move on now.
not
quick question? Very quickly, you mentioned speed watch.
yeah.
Where, and does it include if you block 20 miles an hour as streets?
It will do, yes. We're hoping to do it within the Aylward Road, right the way over to Dorset Road. That whole sort of rat run.
20 miles an hour?
Yeah.
You're not going to tell us when,
Not as yet, no, but if we could get some volunteers, it would be fantastic. But we get some volunteers, I can get some dates. Yeah, I can get some dates.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Getting the burglaries dealt with.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Right, so just the usual formalities. I have no apologies for absence, apart from the fact that Ingrid said she would be late. So it does seem to be a full house, I must admit. And the minutes of the last meeting have been circulated, subject to one late alteration, which has been incorporated. So, any matters arising in the minutes that I will sign. And that now brings us to our speaker. I haven't actually been introduced yet. Sorry, I've been a bit tied up at the back of the room when you arrived, I think. So we have...
So I'm Katie Halter.
Katie Halter from London Borough of Merton to talk to us about climate change. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So I'm one of 2 climate change officers at Merton Council, and I'm here to tell you about the climate change action plan we're developing. I was going to start by giving you a quick update on the progress we've made so far. A little bit about some of the evidence that we've been uncovering along the way. We did a consultation, so I was going to give you a little taste of the consultation survey results and talk about next steps. I'll pause there. Is there anything in particular that people want me to cover? I'll pause after each section for questions. Is there anything that people really want to know that I haven't mentioned? Okay, I'll crack on, but I'll pause after every section so that you've got an opportunity to ask questions. So in terms of an update, hopefully most of you know by now that the Council declared a climate emergency at the July Council last year. What that did was set decarbonisation targets for the London Borough of Merton, and that is to become carbon neutral by 2050. And also it set a target to decarbonise the Council's buildings and services by 2030. Both of those are very stretching and ambitious targets, and the vote was a cross-party unanimous vote, so there's really strong support within the Council to do this. So since we've had that declaration, we've been undergoing an evidence review. We've hired some consultants to do a greenhouse gas inventory of the borough. We've undertaken a public consultation, which hopefully a few of you have done. So that was the climate survey that we issued last year. And we've been undergoing an internal work programme to have a think about how, from a council's point of view, we may want to meet those targets. So I was going to move on to talk a little bit about the evidence, but are there any questions about what we've done so far? Oh, I forgot to say that we've set up the Climate Emergency Working Group, sorry. And Councillor Daniel Holden there sits on that membership as well. So they were set up, and there's a mixture of residents and businesses and other organisations, and their purpose is to steer the action plan.
Am I right in thinking that on the 26th of February, the AGM of Sustainable Merton is going to produce a sort of fact sheet of what you found and what we as residents can do, or have I misunderstood what's happening at that AGM? Sustainable Merton AGM on the 26th of February, they said the council
yes.
say what it's doing.
So Sustainable Merton are launching, I think this is what you mean, they're launching a list of activities that people might want to adopt to help with their carbon emissions. Is that what you meant?
Yes, but I thought it was also going to be Merton telling us in black and white what you're going to do and what we can do as well. So how will we know what the results of the consultation is and what we as individuals can do?
So I'm going to tell you a little bit now about the consultation results. If I am invited to that launch, I will come. But or do you mean the workshop?
No. The AGM is going to have some presentation.
Yeah. So if we're invited, we'll be delighted to come and share that with you. So shall I move on? Okay. So a little bit about the evidence. So we've got the draft results for the greenhouse gas inventory. That has accounted for about 700,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide that is produced by Merton each year. About 3/4 of that is due to energy that is used in properties, so gas for heating, electricity, etc. And about 1/4 of that is due to transport, so it's essentially petrol and diesel, and that's mostly down to car use. The greenhouse gas inventory doesn't include all emissions because some of them are very hard to count. So it doesn't include the more indirect emissions, like, for example, travel taken by Merton residents outside Merton. So it doesn't include things like flights. So there are a bunch of things which are also significant that we can't yet put a number on. And they will include things like the products that people buy, food that we eat, particularly meat. In terms of transport, flights are very significant in terms of their greenhouse gas emissions. And we'll look to try and get a sense of what they are alongside the harder numbers on the energy. We also are counting the greenhouse gas emissions that result from Merton Council's buildings and services, and they account for about 2.5% of the borough's emissions so far. So if I move on to how you actually might get to a carbon neutral borough, I was going to talk a little bit through what that actually might mean in practice and what the implications are. But does anyone have any questions on the greenhouse gas emissions that Merton produce at the moment?
I'd like to ask how you actually measure 700,000 cubic tons of carbon, because the reason I asked this question is because there was a documentary on television about 2 months ago where somebody was asking Watchdog about how they could contribute to carbon dioxide reduction on their flights, and he found that every different airline measured the same flight in different ways with a different carbon figure. So, you know, if the airlines don't, you know, if 10 different airlines have 10 different ways of measuring something, which way are you measuring it? And are you sure that it's right?
So that's quite a technical question, and I'd be happy to pick it up in more detail, but essentially what we're using are central government produced figures broken down by region for things like electricity production, gas use, and we're also using the Department of Transport's figures on mileage, and they're broken down by local authority area. So the main bulk of the evidence come from that. Things like flights, as I said, we haven't actually, because it's the more indirect emissions are less easy to quantify. So we haven't attempted to do that, but some people have done it by things like taking all the jet fuel that's burned for all the domestic flights and divided it by the population. So you can get a sense of what that are, but it's not very robust data for an area this small. So a little bit to how to get to become a carbon neutral borough. So if you are to draw a pathway to becoming a carbon neutral borough, what that basically equates to is a 12% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions for the borough every year to 2050. And how you might achieve that, I'll give you a little sense of it. So some of these numbers are a bit finger in the air, but they're my best guess until we get the report from the consultants. But it essentially boils down to decarbonising about 3,000 homes a year every year to 2050. So that would be adding insulation, replacing gas heating with electric heating, and putting renewable energy on your home, like solar PV, for example. For transport, it essentially means no petrol and diesel vehicles, so they would need to be replaced by either active forms of travel like walking, cycling and using public transport, or replaced by electric vehicles. In terms of waste and products, we're really talking about buying products that are more local, having less packaging, less meat consumption, and really preventing waste where you can, and recycling as much as possible. In terms of finances, you're really trying to avoid investing in fossil fuel companies which have a high impact in terms of fossil fuel use, and actively investing in businesses which will help to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, like, for example, wind farms. And that can help with carbon offsetting, which means that you can, for emissions that are really expensive or really, really hard to get rid of, you can essentially invest in carbon mitigation elsewhere. And in terms of green spaces, this is really about trees, because trees have the best capacity to lock in carbon. So that's about increasing the amount of trees and also planting them in a way that will help with climate resilience. So things like sustainable drainage, and cities can capture a lot of heat, and trees can help with the shading for that. So I was going to move on to the survey results. I feel like I'm taking quite a long time though, so I will do that very briefly and then talk about next steps. So we issued the consultation in about September last year. It had 600 respondents, which is quite good for a council consultation. 50 of those were organisations, and we had a separate survey for organisations to fill in. These logged literally thousands of points of view, so we were really, really grateful and happy with the response we got. We had an overwhelmingly positive response in terms of how people felt about the need to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. So 90% roughly said that they were worried about climate change, they felt responsible, personally responsible, and thought that their actions could make a difference. About 70% thought that should take priority over other issues, and also there was roughly the same amount who were supportive of council action to mitigate climate change emissions. Organisations that responded to the survey, there were quite a low number of businesses that submitted responses, so that's probably where we have more work to do. But the ones that responded basically felt like they had the knowledge and the tools to get on with reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So the ones that responded in a very positive way. I won't go through the detail of the responses unless there's a big call to, but I guess the more general points to say are that people will really produce a lot of ideas about how we can mitigate greenhouse gas emissions in all the different sectors, which we've captured and logged. They also wanted a lot more community engagement, raising profile and providing more information. They wanted stricter planning policies to help tackle climate change. They wanted the council and the community to lobby other people, central governments, etc., for faster change. They wanted more funding, and they wanted the council to lead by example. I'll pause there. Are there any questions? I know I haven't gone into a lot of detail, but are there any questions about the survey?
Actually, my question was more about the plan. So you said 12% a year we have to do now. So is there going to be a plan for every single year? So for 2020, what happens if we don't achieve 12? We then have to do more the next year? Is that going to be then monitored every year?
So shall I move on to that?
Okay, sorry, yeah.
So I'll talk quickly about the next steps then. So the next steps, so we've logged 143 major actions that people have suggested, and infinite variations of those, because lots of people came at the same problem in a different way. These were collected from the survey, from the great work that the Climate Emergency Working Group have been doing, from council officers and other groups like the Wimbledon Society, and also from the evidence that we've collected. So we've got what we call the long list of possible actions, and our aim over the next month or so is to really prioritise which ones are the most achievable, deliverable, and give the most impact. So our aim over the next few months is to get some consensus about what those priority actions are, and that will form the basis of our action plan. That will be benchmarked against the evidence that the consultants are producing, so we can see the extent to which the actions will deliver the target. And our aim is to track progress against the target using the greenhouse gas inventory that we've done. So it may not look like a year-on-year plan in the way that you've described, partly because the action plan is likely to be quite high level, and lots of the actions in it are likely to filter into existing policies and programmes that are already happening. So the local plan is a good example. So if we propose changes to planning policy, we'll still have to go through that consultation process to get it into the local plan. But what we expect is that we'll have actions consistent with meeting the target, but not all of them will be funded. So we know already that there will be big areas that the council won't have resources to sort of go full steam ahead on. But our intention is to identify what they are, use that to find out how we can get the money. So that's the approach that we're hoping to take.
Are you getting any encouragement from central government in terms of providing finance?
So I know that a little bit less than other things, partly because we've got a new Prime Minister, so it's hard to tell at the moment how that's all going to play out. So before the election he promised a lot of money to local councils. Haven't heard any news about how that's going. So I'm afraid we'll just have to wait and see. But for example, he did announce, I think today, that he was going to so the previous policy, for example, was to ban new diesel cars by 2040. So he's looking to move back that timetable, and that will impact on how we respond as a council. And similarly, the building regulations are in consultation. So we are hoping that that will result in strict building regulations that are consistent with zero carbon aims, and if not, then we'll be reviewing the local matters.
So obviously you will need more money. Right. Yes, you shut your book.
Yeah, so the last thing to say was that after we've done that prioritisation process, it's really about drafting a plan which will go to Cabinet. So that was all I was going to say.
Okay, right. So I'm sure you won't mind taking a few ad hoc questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I heard something about planting trees, I got slightly twitchy because planting trees are very good in built-up areas and so on, but it can mitigate against nature conservation when there are areas which should be cleared of trees. Now, I happen to know actually that in the eastern United States, an area greater than the British Isles has gone back to woodland, so in a sense they've done it for us. In areas like Surrey, which is part of this part of the country, they're overrun with trees. They can't cut them back fast enough. There's a herd of 400 cattle run by Surrey Wildlife Trust to prevent encroaching scrub on the North Downs and places like that. And in this borough, the poor old Conservatives in Mitcham Common being cut again, and they're fighting a losing battle against scrub and tree encroachment. So, you know, it can be a bad thing to plant trees for conservation.
Trees are, for much of Britain, the final ecological condition in which the environment achieves. So natural succession will result in trees, and
that may be true, but since about 4000 BC we've been clearing trees, and a lot of the valuable habitats have arisen since then. Heathland has been around for 3,000 years. That's a fair habitat, a very valuable habitat.
I think we can have a private conversation going on. I mean, one thing I would say about trees is we're thinking not just in Merton, but everywhere. The more trees we plant, then the less land we have for producing food. So that's always a bit of an awkward one.
Just a quick word on trees. So the consultation survey, there was a good group of people that recognised that we were a green borough and we have a lot of trees, but there were also a very big call to plant more trees. If we are to meet the mayor's target, for example, we'd have to plant about 800 trees a year to meet that, and that would result in a 10% increase in tree cover. But if you look at it purely from a climate perspective, and I recognise that that's not the only perspective you should look at green infrastructure for, but we have about 200 trees in the borough, and that offsets about 0.05% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the borough. So even though we have 23% green cover in the area, in pure climate terms, it actually has a very small impact according to the numbers that we've got. I've asked the consultants to look at that a bit more, just to check that we're right. But the major issues are likely to be gas use, electricity, and petrol and diesel, mostly in cars.
I think in towns it's quite clear that we need a lot more trees than we've got. So
yes, but even if you doubled the tree cover in Merton,
wouldn't do much. No.
you would only offset 0.1% of Merton's emissions.
Yeah.
So I take the gentleman's point about the fact that Merton is an urban area or suburban area. So and you have to think about lots of different uses of the same space. So we need to take that into account as well.
Jim.
I wasn't going to talk about trees, but I'll just mention it that you've only got to look at Wimbledon Chase to see the psychological impact of having tree planting as opposed to no trees.
Yeah.
It's completely transformed Wimbledon Chase.
Yeah, I'm not against trees.
No.
I want to make that clear. Just from a climate impact.
The other point was harking back to the Merton rule, where Merton led the way in this country on policy and actually getting a renewable energy policy into the UDP. In the process that you're going through at the moment, are you envisaging that policy will actually be published into the local plan with specifics about what targets have to be met?
So, I don't want to go into too much detail about the planning policy, but you start with the national policy, and then there's the Greater London Authorities policy, and then there's the Merton's local policies. So we look to see what can be achieved through the London and the national government's policies, and then we make a decision about whether there's justification for going further. So that's something that we're looking at closely. We've been gathering evidence on that. I guess one thing I would say, so the London policy is to have all major developments to be zero carbon. The downside of that policy is that it doesn't have to all be zero carbon on site. So the developer can pay money if they don't meet zero carbon on site. And that's the main thing that myself and the other climate change officer are looking at whether there's justification to go further. The difficulty is the tension between having a fantastic zero carbon property versus affordable housing. And we need a high bar of evidence to demonstrate that our policies do not negatively impact what is a very strong target for affordable housing. And we don't know yet the extent to which we can go beyond the GLA's policies, but we are actively looking at that at the moment.
Can I just finish that? I was just to say, the last peak in awareness of the community to climate change was about 20 years ago, and then we went down in a trough, and really nothing very much happened for a long time. But now we've gone back up again. But certainly back in year 2000, one of the barriers to doing this was cost, and it was a really important barrier because, you know, when a government's got policy for building however many thousands of houses a year, cost does start to become quite a serious factor. So, you know,
yeah.
money.
And I guess it's also worth knowing that new builds, although people see new developments quite a lot, if you count from now to 2050, roughly 5% of the building stock will be new build, and 95% will be the existing houses that you see. So the real big challenge is actually decarbonising homes and commercial properties that are already here and are likely to still be here in 2050.
Well, I appreciate what we're trying to do, and obviously it's a good thing. I've lived and worked in a number of major cities in Asia and Africa, for example, Manila, Dakar, Phnom Penh, and so on. And compared to the air pollution in those places, in London it's so pure that whatever we do here in London is really just a drop in the ocean compared to what needs to be done in terms of saving the planet. What's your view on that?
So I said that the greenhouse gas inventory identified 700,000 tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions. If you count the indirect emissions from things like goods that people buy and transport outside the borough, you could probably double or triple that number. The UK produces about, I'm going to get this wrong, about 450 million tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions. So we produce probably about 1 to 1.5 million, roughly. So, to my mind, Merton is still significant in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. We have very low control over what happens in other countries. We have to rely on the international negotiations. So, my personal view is that it's our responsibility to get our own backyard in order.
You mentioned greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, but you also, I think, used the term carbon neutral and zero carbon. Does that also include monoxide and particulates, which are perhaps more immediately damaging to health? And what about CFCs? Are they included in the targets as well?
So there is a difference between greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution emissions. So the ones that you mentioned were air pollution emissions. So those.
But are those also lumped into carbon neutrality?
So there's no is the short answer. But they're covered under the Air Quality Action Plan. So there's an action plan that already exists to tackle those. We know that there's activities that happen that help air pollution, quite often also help climate change. So if you stop using your car so often and do more walking, that will help both air pollution and climate change. So we're working together to try and make sure that we've got a good synergy between those two. But if particulates don't have a big impact on climate, it won't be discreetly in the climate action plan.
David.
Yeah, as a speaker, you mentioned about some of the responders saying that the council should lead by example. I just wondered what the current and perhaps future policy might be on a travel to work basis for your employees. A number of the roads are occupied by cars that the occupiers end up working at the centre and they're there all day long, and one begins to wonder how effective whatever policy you have at the moment is, and whether there's any opportunity now to focus to improve that.
There is some action going on at the moment to do a staff travel plan. That staff travel plan covers all staff and some of the services that Merton Council offer. We're forming that at the moment. I can't give you any detail because nothing's been formally agreed, but just to say that we recognise that there's an issue there. We feel that there are too many people driving into work and using cars to undertake services on behalf of the council. We're looking to change that and make it easier for people to use bikes, use electric vehicles, but I can't announce anything because those haven't yet been agreed. But I just want to assure you that there is work ongoing. We're also going to set up something called the Green and Healthy Guardians group within the council, and that will, in a softer way, try and encourage people to behave in a more sustainable way at work, and that would include travel.
I think we have time for one more question.
Is air pollution considered in planning policy?
So,
high levels of air pollution.
So that's probably something I can't answer in detail because I don't work in the air quality team. But what I do know is that there are, I don't know what the details, but there are policies in relation to air pollution, and I know that the planning applications are looked at by the air quality team. So I can't say any more detail because it's not my area of question.
As long as it's a short question.
The number of people here tonight shows you that the residents of Merton are very interested in this. One hopes that the action plan would actually come down to our level. You've told us 75% of the emissions are due to us and our properties. Please end up giving us the detail. The average household uses 3,000 kilowatts of electricity. Tell us what it means in reducing our carbon if we only use 2,500. We want practical examples of what we can do.
Okay, thank you.
Right, well, Katie, thank you very much
Thank
indeed. You answered lots of questions. So, we come to the question of the boundary commission, so its effect on Merton Park. Peter is coming along with you at all, but I will just...
heard about the existential threat to our planet. And I'm going to tell you about the existential threat to our ward, over at Merton Park. And indeed its survival as a three-member ward after the next election in 2022. So quite a big deal for us. I need you to drive it.
Which way do you want?
So, let me run through why we are in this position. The Boundary Commission is basically responsible for ensuring that each vote in Merton in a local election carries the same weight. Okay? So, that's what they mean by electoral equality. They have given us gentle encouragement to reduce the number of councillors, and we have acceded to that by agreeing to reduce from 60 to 57. It was made very clear to us that we certainly shouldn't attempt to argue for an increase in the number of councillors, and they were really looking for a reduction in the number, rather as with the House of Commons. The other variable here is that we must work to what the electorate will be, as far as we can estimate it, in 2025. And put those two things together and you come out with 2,858 electors per councillor. At the moment, the ratio is 2,527. So they're asking each of us to look after about 330 more electors. So when you put those factors together, you start to see which wards in the borough are sort of below their required weight. And the two that come up top of the list are Village Ward and Hillside Ward. And in the case of Village Ward, they happen to sit conveniently next to Wimbledon Park Ward, which is about 23% over its required number of electors. About 10,000 electors in Wimbledon Park Ward, and about 6,000, I'm using very round numbers, in Village. So they will engage in a sort of swap of electors, if you like. And Daniel's Ward, Hillside, is subscale, so that will go down to being a two-member ward. Then that leaves quite a clutch of wards that are all below scale by, well, those sort of amounts, really. So what we're engaged in here is in a game of musical chairs to say which of these wards is going to end up with only being a two-member rather than a three-member ward. And you can see the kind of increase in the number of electors we would need. So take that figure I gave you, 2,858 multiplied by 3, and that's the target we should aim at. That's what we are projected to have. We are short by just under 900 electors. So that's the sort of cold mathematics of it. If we look at the map, thank you. The proposals that the Boundary Commission have come to us with are to take all the roads north of Kingston Road. There's the red line shows Kingston Road, and put them into a new ward, Trinity. Trinity will be, well, Dundonald will go altogether. The new Trinity ward will extend from Wimbledon Chase right through central Wimbledon, south of the main line, and all the way to Hayden's Road. So it's a huge area, really. And west of Watery Lane, the Whitby line, everything there, Cannon Hill Lane, Elwood Road, would go into Cannon Hill Ward. And that's, in total, 1,500 of our electors we would lose, would be disenfranchised, would go to neighbouring wards. So, for example, the Nelson Health Centre is actually on the junction of Trinity and Cannon Hill there. So that would be, it would actually be in Cannon Hill, but we would be serving 3 wards, whereas at present it's now pretty central to Merton Park Ward. As you might guess, we are less than enchanted with these proposals. And from the level of response we've already had, we know that you are too pretty unhappy about them. So we have been urging you to write to the Boundary Commission, and you will not leave this evening without taking a leaflet that will tell you exactly how to do that. So let me say now, we've had a decent response, but I'm thinking if everybody here tonight who hasn't already written were to do so, that would make a huge difference. I think we really, we'd see it over the line there for the representations we need. So, what does the Boundary Commission tell us as to what we can say? All representations can be taken into account. So, and they will also be published, by the way, but with names and identifying details redacted. So you will get your name, you won't get your name in print, but what you say will appear on the Boundary Commission's website. And the most important point really to think about, the Commission is persuaded by evidence that demonstrates community identity. So that really is at the heart of this. If we can demonstrate, and I think we can, that these rather arbitrary boundaries actually split communities. They don't enfold them, they break them up. And the Commission also says the Commission is always keen to benefit from the local knowledge of those affected by our recommendations. So, you know, they breeze into town, they take a quick scoop round and come to some pretty arbitrary conclusions, such as that Kingston Road is an impermeable barrier because one person wrote in and suggested that that's where the boundary should fall. And then get things wrong, like saying that the catchment area for the schools doesn't extend across Kingston Road, when we know it does. So there's some pretty flaky facts in there, which we are well placed to challenge. So points to think about in your submissions, as I already said, these changes, far from consolidating our communities, will actually split them apart. People will no longer belong in our family in Merton Park. There is good historical evidence for the boundaries that we have, both in the parish records, parish boundaries, but also if you look back to the John Ennis estate, the land he bought, the foundations of his garden suburb. And out of these have grown a mass of community activities. So there is our association with membership right across the ward. There is the John Ennis Society, there is St Mary's. There's a host of things that say Merton Park about the people who take part in them and care about them. And in the sort of quotidian, the daily movements across our ward. If you just think about Kingston Road, I mean, how many the movements across there to schools, the Nelson Health Centre, it's a pub. Splitting these functioning communities, coffee shops, apart just seems so wrong, and so much at odds with the professed aims of what the Boundary Commission want to achieve. So we think we've got a really strong case to reject these proposals, we really do. And the Boundary Commission have said that they are less concerned with the quantity than the quality of the evidence. So for that reason, we haven't gone out with petitions, we haven't produced a template letter. We really want you to put in your own thoughts, but we have got a leaflet which gives you some pointers to work with, which I hope you will take. But the thing, as they say, the clock is ticking. We have until the 2nd of March, and that is less than 4 weeks to get these submissions in. I think we can do it. And when you think that the plan for the whole of Merton with this restructuring was based on just 26 submissions, we can do rather better than that in defending our ward. So I would urge you please to go home and it need only be 3 or 4 lines. It doesn't have to be a mannered or academic essay. I mean, some have been terrific, actually, particularly those recording the historical antecedents to the ward. But it's as short or as long as you want to make it. But we do need you to write in. Okay? Do you want to break that for a bit?
Thank you. I'll just say one thing very quickly. You'll notice that Peter has not put up anything to say, do praise the councillors and the Merton Park Ward Residents Association. This is not because of his terrific modesty. This is because we do need to be careful what we write. The boundary said that we mustn't try to seek electoral advantage. So we need to be careful about what we say on the political side, although of course Merton Park independents are a political party. But what I'm really wanting to say to you is that they, as Peter's already said, they want to hear about the community, that they say do their proposals respect communities. And clearly, in the case of Merton Park, they don't. And this is what we've got to get across. So I think the important thing, when you write, make sure you start with talking about the community before you start talking about the resident association, because supposing you've got somebody who...
Hubert, can I say, I think the resident association is the community. It's not...
Well, that's a very good way of putting it. Make sure that what you say about London Park Ward resident association is to do with the community.
Peter, I don't think, to be fair, I don't think Peter's actually said yet that we are going to do as one of our 3 councillors. I may be wrong.
Yes. Oh, okay. Sorry, yes.
Yes. One of you is actually going.
So along with the 1,500 electors we will lose, we will also, under these plans, be reduced from 3 to 2 councillors. And we would find it pretty hard to function because the 3 of us do all the things that a much larger political group would do. So it's quite we arrange monthly meetings, we produce forum, we get the alerts out. These are all the things that the workload will be spread amongst a larger number in a larger political party. So it really would not work well.
And can't we say that? Can we say that?
Yes. You can say anything you like, but Hubert's point that they're really looking for community identity as the theme that glues us together to talk about that.
How far do we have to go in suggesting an alternative?
We are certainly looking, I think it's common knowledge, at the area north of Kingston Road, taking in the Wilton Crescent conservation area.
And what would the boundaries be if that expanded?
They would need to go, as you know, our present boundaries stop at Henfield Road. We probably need to go a block up to Avery's, to the area.
And Borough Road you have to go to, basically.
There are no electors in the rec. I think if you stop at Avery, the numbers stack up fairly well.
And I was going to say, would that give us about an extra 900 electors?
On the work I've done, yes.
Should we send photographs of how lovely the area is?
I think that's...
I think there'd be no harm.
No, actually... as I say, picture tells or says 1,000 words, and I think that there is truth in that, actually. So certainly that heart of community, Hubert's talked about a village feel, all of that is well expressed in photograph, yes.
Who do you want letters sent to you? Do you want copies to you or Hubert or?
We ask that you send copies, Shirley, to MPWRA at Merton Park, and then both Hubert and I see them.
Sorry?
Yeah.
It's on the leaflet. Thank you.
I think it's important to mention that if we need to keep the present boundaries and on top of the current ward as it is, then add in anything north of Kingston Road. So we don't want to lose anything, and we do want to add that north of Kingston Road.
We certainly want to lose what we've got. So I look around, we'd be losing lots of people, I think.
Peter, given that this is driven by numbers, have you got any idea what the margin of error is on those numbers that we need? Because the percentage difference is relatively low, it's only sort of 13%. So are we confident that the estimated figures in 2025 are right?
Yes, they do take account of known major developments, such as the new stadium in Plough Lane and the 600 flats that are coming there. Otherwise, they really just extrapolate on anticipated growth rates in population.
They just use the percentage.
Yeah.
Which when we look in the context of Merton, the estimates that have been made for school numbers have been sort of seriously wrong. You know, the boundaries on pupil numbers have been, you know, out.
Yeah, they are really hard to get right.
So the margin of error is quite high. You know,
Yes.
You know, is that another argument to undermine what this is?
I mean, the boundary commissions say that they will. They start worrying when we're outside of plus or minus 10% of the target population for the ward. But so those wards I put up under the current numbers certainly are outside that limit. But I think I would be more comfortable getting within 2-3-5%. I think. But there is a it's not exactly a trade-off, but you need to model the numbers alongside natural boundaries. You don't want to be carving out half a road to balance your numbers. Yeah. So it's got to look coherent on a map, and it's got to feel right. Steve?
Any reason why we can or whether we can or can't refer to the proposed development and increased numbers in Morden? Because if they are this side of the borough, in other words, in SW19, they will automatically be part of this ward, and numbers will then go up, and then we'll have not enough councillors, number of people.
We have got, when we split the ward into polling districts, there is some small allowance for developments in Morden, but it's I'm trying to remember the number.
We're talking about 1,500 people there. I mean, or even more than that, if half of those are added into our area,
then we'd be there. That's not, and let's face it, the regeneration of Morden is moving at snail's pace. So if we've even started to develop or redevelop the Kennedy Road car park by 2025, I would be surprised. But yeah, so certainly that was the first site identified for redevelopment, but it wouldn't be more than a couple of hundred. Yeah. On a very modest scale.
But there's no reason not to mention it. Sorry, I mean, I can mention it. It is a prospective growth in our numbers, which will weigh things in the other direction.
Well, they are going to stick with these projected numbers for 2025. So, yeah. Nick?
Would there be any implications, I suppose, in terms of community cohesiveness and sort of, I don't know, cultural identity and that sort of thing, in splitting the Merton Park conservation area over more than one ward? It sounds like an unnatural sort of thing to do, you know, given that from a certain, culturally, architecturally, and what have you.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole conservation area
exactly
is effectively one unit.
I mean, like sort of yin and yang. We've got the John Innes Merton Park conservation area south of Kingston Road. We're now proposing to add John Innes Wilton Crescent conservation area. So they do belong.
John Innes did not build two garden suburbs, two conservation areas. He built one. So it makes every sense to bring the part of the John Innes area north of the Kingston Road into our ward. Should have been there already. And I've been talking to people over in there.
The point I was making was that with what they're suggesting, say splitting one side of Watery Lane out of the thing, you have opposite sides of Watery Lane still being in the same Merton Park conservation area, but they're going to stick us in two different wards.
No, that's crazy, isn't it? It's terrible. I mean, you can see where Watery Lane is, but when the boundary then starts running down the back of the gardens to Elwood Road, I mean, boundaries are meant to be legible and visible, and that's just does not meet that criteria.
I think we might break for coffee. That doesn't mean that the discussion on the boundary commission is over. There'll be plenty of time to talk about it, but we are hoping that everybody will write lots of letters. And Elwood Road, right, but so you're in the John Innes Conservation Area. The Wilton Crescent one consists of Wilton Crescent itself, Wilton Grove, Mayfield Road, Kenwood Road, and what's the name of the one at the top?
Kingswood.
Fairlawn.
Fairlawn technically isn't, actually. And then, in addition to that, that's the conservation area, but the area that John Innes actually owned, the farmland he bought, also includes Avebury Road and come on. That's where we're going for, not more for the road. And there are other conservation areas, and one person actually sent in their submission suggesting that we should actually try and get all the conservation areas that are close to the John Innes one into the ward. But that will be probably a little more difficult to administer.
Well, I forget what it's called, but Quinton, Richmond and Chatsworth, they're another conservation areas.
Wimbledon Chase, is it now?
Yeah, they are, yeah.
It was the Richmond Chatsworth conservation area. I think it's now Wimbledon Chase.
Well, I think Quinton's in as well.
It goes from Quintin to Sandringham, I think. Any more questions? So hope you all know enough to write eloquently and tell the Boundary Commission the error of their ways.
A useful point was made to me during the break that we do want people who will remain within, even if, let me start again. You don't have to live in the areas that will be exiled to Cannon Hill or Trinity. You have a right to a view, and I hope you'll express it if you are within the area we showed on the map. So we need to show we are a single ward, a single community across those boundaries. So whichever side you are, do please make that view known. Other thing I didn't mention going through, but there is some analysis that the council have done of what they like to call social cohesion, social capital, or resilience is that buzzword. It's the extent to which people get on, have bonds between them. Of the 20 wards in Merton, we are the top-rated ward for social capital. So I think that is, if you like, statistical proof of our claims about community, which we certainly put in our submissions.
How did they measure that?
It's on about sort of 50 different indicators, but it's things like the biennial resident survey about I get on with my neighbours, or I know there'll be somebody to lend a hand if I need it. It's also measures of civic engagement like voting, like participating in voluntary activities. So it is quite a compendium of different measures, yeah. And I can't resist this, but which ward do you think is bottom of that list, or not quite?
The village. The village.
It is the village. So there are two measures. One is a sort of affluence measure, where village is top, but in fact it comes 19th out of 20 on this social capital measure. So be careful what you wish for. Don't allow too many. Don't allow the house prices to go too high. have them being sort of gutted for years on end while I think we've developed a rationale.
Was there a hand going up in the night?
Keep their money to themselves, yeah.
Right. So everybody ready to write? Whether they live in the areas affected or whether they live in the areas unaffected, because those of us who live in the areas unaffected want to write in and say that the people in the areas that are affected are just as much part of the community as we are. Right, okay. So that brings us to our usual councillors' reports and question time, I think. We talked about one or two things last night.
Yes, I mean, I am aware that the proposed redevelopment of Wimbledon Chase Station has generated a lot of interest and alarm. And I'm not going to say anything too committing because I sit on the planning committee, so when it eventually comes there for a decision, I don't want to prejudice my right to vote there. However, two things you need to know about. One is that there is a second exhibition on the 11th of February, that's about a week today, isn't it? In the afternoon, 4:30 till 8 at Joseph Hood School.
Where is Joseph Hood School?
It's in Watley Avenue. It's just outside. It's the other side of the realm. So that's being staged by the developer. He did put on one which I couldn't get, so I will try to get to this one.
Could you say the date again?
The 11th of February. It's in our alert actually there, yeah. The other point I want to make is that I may be proven wrong, but we're a long, long way from a live planning application yet. I mean, the developer has put up his plans as a, what should we say, stalking horse, starting point. He has to take on board the responses to the consultation which the planners have required him to carry out as part of his submission. So they said it was something on this scale, produce evidence for us that how the community react to it, which you've done. So they will then say to him, we have particular concerns about what you're proposing here. I hope I won't be proved wrong, but I would be very surprised if that 9-storey block with no step-free access to the station goes through unscathed in that form. Okay, you know, I'm not the same developers' motives, but
Shall I just say something on that? One of the worries about the station is that it has no step-free access, and it's quite a long climb up to the station, isn't it?
And there's another point, it's on a curve, and getting off the train involves a leap of faith. They haven't even had the sense to build a ramp. You know, if you go to Heathrow, there is an area where we've got level access, at least, and they haven't even bothered to do that. I presume that's South Western Railway, the same as Waterloo.
The same happens at Merton Park, actually.
Yeah.
But, Graham, can I quote you?
Well, I was just going to say a couple of things on this. I heard you first inquiry, and being a railway enthusiast, I thought the obvious thing to do here is to put a lift in from the ground floor on the pavement, right underneath that bridge. It's very wide there because it's an island platform, so the platforms are not together, the lines are not together, they're spaced apart, so you get in the lift on the ground floor and go up to the platform edge and you're there. No problem at all.
Yeah.
I've been advised that would not be possible because they cannot put a lift in, because it would mean that someone would have to be there. In case anybody is trapped in that lift, they would require somebody there. Wimbledon Chase and all that line are unstaffed stations. They will never have anybody on duty. It's not like Wimbledon or something. They will never go to anybody there. So there would never be anyone to get anybody out of a lift, should they be tracked? So there was no chance of putting a lift in.
All lifts are connected.
Sorry?
All lifts are connected, or they should be connected to through a BT line to someone that mans it. So
yeah, but that would require someone still to come out, wouldn't it?
well, Fibergate, just down the road.
I had a better idea. It seemed to be that if we're having a development, as well as renovating the station, surely this block of flats will have a lift in it. Could they not position the lift so that it served the station as well? And that could be a requirement.
I mean, they told us that they couldn't afford the lift because it was too expensive. So they gave you a different reason and they gave me a different reason.
But this is the trouble, isn't it? I mean, if you ask for affordable housing, they usually grant permission with affordable housing in it, then they come along for the affordable housing afterwards. They can't afford it. It's not affordable for them. There's an awful lot of things that should be done are not done on excuses. Right.
I mean, if it happened to Wimbledon, Chase and Nixon, was that people in South Merton would want it. And it would go on. And we just have to work. Those ladies said they haven't got the money either.
But they do have the money because they're looking at their profit tick box. 64 residences are planned to go up there. 64 in that small space. The railway is nearly 100 years old at Wimbledon Chase. With this redevelopment, and they call it a redevelopment of the station because it's not a redevelopment of the station, they're just moving the entrance from where it is now to the right-hand side. We've got one chance to get this right, to put a lift access for people who are disabled, children, parents with luggage. That railways, that connection services to airports. There's always people with luggage going up and down the stairs, up and down the stairs. In my building, I have a lady with MS, and she can barely make those stairs.
We're going to move on, actually. What else do we?
I think, the other, I'm just thinking we put out recently, there is going on right now a consultation on the £500 million that the government have pledged for a new, what do they call it now? It's not just A&E, it's state-of-the-art, really, hospital for our CCG area. So just to, you must be so familiar with this, we have St Helier, we have Epsom General, which is on the far side of Epsom, and we have I'm talking about the Epsom and St Helier Trust, and we have the former Sutton Hospital alongside the Marsdens. So the CCG for the three areas have to figure out really where they are going to put the one hospital with the state-of-the-art facilities that they can afford to build. They've made it clear that they can't do that on all sites. So they press the point that 85% of the services that are at St Helier now will remain, but they will not include A&E, they won't include maternity. So we've had Daniel Elkeles in meetings past, some of you may remember, very plausibly presenting this. And the other point is that they do claim in their literature that with a clear site they could get this built in about 4 years, whereas the St Helier site, where they would effectively be rebuilding around an old hospital, will take a lot longer. So it's up to you to think about that, do respond to the consultation, which is open, Vicky, until
1st of April.
1st of April. Thank you.
Oh.
Good. The council's declared position remains that it must be on the St Helier site, and hell will freeze over before the fair and Siobhan budges from that. but it's obviously we're very preoccupied with almost literally parochial matters of what happens to our ward, but bigger picture is that we will, or new hospital will serve the area for many, many years to come.
Can I just comment, Peter, that I picked this up a couple of days ago at the Nelson Medical Centre. Very helpful leaflet if you want some ideas on what to do.
Do we maybe want to get the temperature of that feeling? Given
Yes, indeed. Okay. Yeah. We've got we have full council tomorrow night. There is a motion about this. We're not quite sure. You're not going to amend it, are you, Daniel? Because it's your motion.
Well, it's my motion, so
Yeah.
I'm amending it. We're basically congratulating the government for investing in this NHS trust after all these years where we've had motto, and we should really get on with it and go ahead and allow the doctors to make the best choice, which the doctors recommended a new Sutton Centre of Excellence and a bit of a refurbishment, or quite serious refurbishment of St Helier and Epsom hospitals. So actually, if we let them get on with it, it'd be good. Whereas if we allow Labour, Siobhan McDonald to have her way, then we'll have a decaying build and that'll get worse over time and no investment. So
Good. So thank you for laying out your pitch on that. We know where we are. Are you interested in comments, Shelley?
Having been Vice Chairman of St Helier Trust Board for something like 8 years, I have to tell you, it was 20 years ago since I left, and we were discussing exactly and in fact, if you'd like to see my papers on using the Epsom site, the Marsden site, I've got them. What worries me is that if we are building an A&E in an area which is a housing estate now, this does not seem the time to put it near the Marsden. The second thing is, but I would have thought that the professionals would have thought this through, that if you want to draw on the experienced staff in your everyday hospital, you need to be able to draw them in. Now, if you have your A&E out at the Marsden, you can't do that if the other hospital stays where it is.
Thank you.
I've always thought, personally, that there's a big playing field opposite St Helier,
yes.
and why can't they build on that and then reconstruct the playing field on the other side? But that's just a wish.
Yeah. Other views? Janet?
I did attend one of these meetings where Siobhan McDonald was very vociferous on various points. But I think the head of the commissioning group, the Dr. Murray,
Yes, Andrew Murray.
I think he made the point that they can't get enough consultants at St Helier at the moment. Now, one thing I didn't quite understand was why having this new hospital at Sutton would make it more easy to get consultants. I didn't quite get the point, and I'm going to put that in my reply. But that, that point kept being made. I don't know whether it's that the consultants would prefer to work at a brand new hospital and it would be on the site of the Marsden and the Institute of Cancer Research, and be this cancer hub that certainly council are very keen on establishing on the Sutton Hospital site.
Or is it that if you have a centre of excellence, then you get more excellent doctors? Just a thought.
We certainly have heard Daniel just make that same point here, haven't we? The difficulty of getting both consultants and nursing staff, actually.
You decided between you how you're going to vote? They'll all vote in different directions, probably.
We haven't seen the amendments.
Yeah, Peter, just a minor question about planning. What's the state of play with the White Hart at the level crossing right now, please?
I can only repeat what I've seen on next door. Not always a reliable source, but it was stated on there that the site had been sold for £7 million, which is rather, I'm looking around here, whereas when the plans were being worked up by Marcus Beale's practice, they looked quite attractive, and we were told that there were not the commercial pressures to maximise returns, so we would get the requisite 40% affordable housing, which we very rarely get on any development. But where that now has gone, I don't know. I think it's probably a couple of years since that exhibition at the old ruts on the plans.
Can I just ask this question? In this area, what is considered what is the price on affordable housing? Affordable for food, and how much would you have to earn to get into affordable housing?
I think you'd have to be a well-paid consultant at one of the hospitals.
It's a misleading term. Within affordable, there are houses available at social rent, which was the old concept of council housing, which would typically be at no more than about 40% of going market rents. Affordable now can also cover part rent, part ownership, those kind of schemes where you're paying into a mortgage and sharing it with the government in effect. I did notice in the press the other day that the average price of a house in Great Britain is £215,000. That's an average price. I don't know what you'd find below £500,000 around here. So it really is we know it's a very big problem. I did a review of problems relating to recruitment and retention of teachers in Merton, and the cost is a big issue. So as newly qualified teachers, they're quite happy to share a house and have a room. But as relationships develop and people want to start a family, the chances of finding anything around here, even within Merton, that you will be able to afford on a teacher's salary or a policeman's salary or a nurse's salary are just vanishingly small.
It applies also to doctors. It's the same story with doctors. The same story. Like teachers, nurses, doctors.
Can I mention one other thing on the planning front? Just, where were we today? End of last week I got an email asking me to have a look at planning application for number 32 Poplar Road, which was for a modest mansard roof extension on the back, and pop round to see flatten the site. So, I've never known this before, but so I obviously got on to planning enforcement, and the story is that when building control went to take a look at the preliminary stages as the builders had taken part of the roof out at the back, that then caused the walls to start caving in, and they had to say that the whole structure was unsafe and had to be demolished. So a real shock, particularly for the neighbours. So if you're walking past, yes, that's the story there. So we now wait to see. They wouldn't require planning permission to demolish there, but they would certainly require planning permission for their rebuild. So.
Who's going to have to pay for that, Peter?
How much?
Who's going to pay for the rebuilding of it?
Difficult one, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on
no VAT now.
Insurance.
No VAT.
No, yes.
They'll dig the footings out. So.
But whether you better claim against your insurance.
I bet the same builders will rebuild the house.
So,
What about our other councillors? Do you have things to say?
Not really, no. 10 o'clock. Nothing really to add.
I asked you if you mind if I mentioned that picked up off the Friends of Wimbledon Town Centre sent out an email saying the council has produced its final draft of the master plan for Wimbledon. So if anyone is interested in what is happening in Wimbledon, the revised plan claims to draw on the previous consultation, but in fact largely ignores residents' feedback, especially in relation to tall buildings in the town centre. I won't say more than that, except that on a windy day, if you walk up Hartfield Road between the tall buildings there, you'll be very lucky to keep your balance if it's really windy. So there's an issue about that master plan for Wimbledon, and if you wanted to get involved in saying something about it, Friends of Wimbledon Town Centre, look at their website.
Just to confirm that all of that, the master plan stuff, will be on our website by tomorrow, and started doing it, and it will be available for you all to follow the links and read more about it.
Fantastic. Right, we've done very well to have got through this far by 5 to 10, but I would just like to... Graham, yeah?
I was just going to sort of mention, I did mention to Thames Water, I sent a letter out. Starting next Monday, Moston Road is going to be dug up for 20 weeks.
Oh, good.
20 weeks. There's going to be traffic lights, the length of the road from Sheridan Road right the way up to Martin Way. There'll be 2-way, 3-way or 4-way traffic lights, depending where you live. They haven't replaced the old water lights, they're putting new big yellow lights on.
Traffic lights all over the place.
Yes.
The deadline to get your letter in is the 2nd of March.
There'll be another email alert there reminding everyone before.
Yeah. But get ahead with it. The next meeting is on the 3rd of March, because it's a leap year, at Merton Park Primary School, and the topic is parking. So, thanks for coming.